Welcome to our deep dive into the history of mental health treatments. We've got some fascinating lectures to unpack here, covering everything from shock therapy and lobotomies to, well, just the power of talking it out.
It's quite a journey when you think about it. Shows how much our understanding of the brain, and behavior for that matter, has changed over time.
It really does. And we're going to start with the treatments that honestly sound a bit like something out of a sci-fi movie. Physical therapies that aim to, well, directly alter the brain, like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, that kind of thing.
Ah, yes, shock therapies. Although, thankfully, modern approaches are a lot more refined than what you see in those films.
Okay, so let's jump right in. What can you tell us about the origins of these shock therapies? Where did this idea of inducing seizures to treat mental illness even come from?
Believe it or not, the idea of using electricity to induce seizures, well, it was inspired by observations in, get this, stockyards.
Hold on, stockyards,
Huh.
like where they keep livestock.
Yeah, you heard that right. Researchers observed that animals, when they were shocked before slaughter, would sometimes fall unconscious. And this kind of sparked the idea of applying this technique to humans, passing an electric current through the brain to induce a convulsion.
I gotta admit, that's a pretty unsettling origin story for a medical treatment. And this method eventually became what we know as electroconvulsive therapy, or ECT, right?
Exactly. Back then, ECT was seen as, well, having fewer complications than chemically induced shock therapy, which was really dependent on a patient's weight and often caused a great deal of discomfort before the convulsion.
Sounds like a pretty rough experience for the patients.
It was. And early ECT had its own set of problems. There were cases of memory loss, even broken bones from from the violent muscle contractions.
Ouch. So if those early forms of shock therapy were so problematic, how did ECT evolve into the treatment we know today?
Well, modern ECT is a far cry from those early days. Anesthesia and muscle relaxants are used now to prevent any physical trauma. And instead of those large, uncontrolled jolts of electricity, they use brief pulses and much more refined electrode placement to target specific areas of the brain.
So it's much more controlled and precise now. But I'm curious about how the use of ECT has shifted over time. It was initially used for schizophrenia, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. But as research progressed, it became clear that ECT was, well, more effective in treating severe cases of depression.
Ah.
Today, it's primarily used for major depression that just hasn't responded to other forms of treatment.
So almost a complete reversal of how it was first applied. But despite all those advancements, ECT still carries a certain stigma, doesn't it? Why do you think that is?
It's understandable, I think, given its history. Those images from movies like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, they really left a lasting impression on the public, shaped perceptions of ECT as, this barbaric practice.
It's amazing how a movie can shape public opinion like that.
Yeah.
But you mentioned that modern ECT is much safer and more refined. So what are some of the key reasons for the continued controversy?
Well, one of the biggest points of contention is that we still don't fully understand how ECT works.
So we know it can be effective for some people, but the exact mechanisms behind its effects remain a mystery.
Yeah, that's a major part of the debate. And because of this lack of understanding, there are concerns about potential long-term side effects, memory loss, even with the modern procedures.
Right, it makes sense. It's hard to fully embrace a treatment when there are such big unknowns about how it's affecting the brain. And this uncertainty has led to some states restricting its use, right?
Yeah, right. States like California, Texas, and Tennessee, they've all implemented limitations on the use of ECT because of those concerns.
So even with endorsements from organizations like the Surgeon General, who in 1999 in their report acknowledged the efficacy and safety of modern ECT, there's still this ongoing ethical debate. I imagine it must be such a difficult decision for patients and doctors, weighing those potential benefits against the risks and unknowns.
Absolutely. It raises important questions about informed consent and patient autonomy, especially with a treatment as powerful as ECT.
It's definitely a lot to think about, especially when you consider that 60 to 70% of people with severe depression, people who haven't responded to other treatments, do experience some relief with ECT.
Yes, the potential benefits are definitely significant, and this tension between the effectiveness of ECT and those unknowns surrounding its mechanisms, it makes for a very complex ethical dilemma.
Okay, so moving on from shock therapy, we're diving into another treatment that carries, well, a heavy historical weight, psychosurgery. Specifically, prefrontal lobotomies. This is definitely a darker chapter in the history of mental health treatment.
It is indeed. It's a fascinating, albeit disturbing example of how a treatment initially hailed as a breakthrough can later reveal, well, devastating consequences.
It's shocking to think that the pioneer of lobotomies, Dr. Antonio Muniz, he actually won a Nobel Prize for his work. It's hard to reconcile that with how we view the procedure today.
It is. It's a stark reminder that our understanding of the brain and, ethical considerations are constantly evolving. Back in the early 20th century, lobotomies were seen as this last resort for patients with severe mental illness, those who were, extremely agitated or violent.
So what exactly did this procedure involve?
It involved severing the connections between the prefrontal cortex, that part of the brain responsible for planning, decision-making, and emotional regulation, and the deeper brain structures.
Sounds incredibly drastic.
Mm.
What was the thinking behind severing those connections? What were they hoping to achieve?
The idea was that by severing those connections, they could essentially dampen the intensity of emotions and reduce those disruptive behaviors.
But like you said, there were some pretty severe consequences.
Yeah, the side effects were often devastating and irreversible. Patients frequently experienced emotional blunting, personality changes, and a much diminished capacity for independent living.
And I read that Dr. Muniz himself met a rather tragic end, being shot by a former patient.
A grim reminder of the potential harm that can be inflicted when medical interventions go wrong.
Yeah. So from shocking the brain to physically altering it, we've seen some, well, pretty intense approaches in these early treatments. Seems like the early 20th century was really focused on those biological explanations for mental illness.
That's a good observation. The focus was definitely on targeting the physical aspects of the brain. But as our understanding evolved, we started to consider the role of thoughts, feelings, and the unconscious mind. And this shift, well, this paved the way for the development of talking therapies.
And that shift in thinking, that marked a real turning point in how we approach mental health. Now, before we delves into the world of talking therapies, there are a couple other physical interventions being explored today that I think you'll find interesting. Electrode implantation and gene therapy.
Yeah, those are definitely intriguing areas of research. They hold both, well, a lot of promise and some ethical challenges.
So electrode implantation first. I understand it involves placing electrodes in specific brain regions to kind of modulate neural activity.
That's right. It's a much more targeted approach than ECT. The goal is to achieve a more precise and controlled effect on brain circuits that are implicated in conditions like Parkinson's disease, epilepsy, and even severe depression.
So it sounds like a much more refined approach than those earlier interventions.
Hmm.
What are some of the potential benefits and risks associated with this technique?
Well, the potential benefits are, they're pretty significant. Imagine being able to target specific brain circuits that are involved in, say, depression or anxiety with incredible precision, potentially alleviating symptoms without the need for medication.
That sounds almost too good to be true. What about the risks?
Well, as with any invasive procedure, there are inherent risks associated with brain surgery, like infection and bleeding. And because we're still learning about all the intricacies of the brain, there's always a possibility of some unintended consequences.
I imagine long-term monitoring is pretty crucial with such a cutting-edge intervention.
Absolutely. It's important to remember that electrode implantation is still at its early stages of development. More research is needed to fully understand its long-term effects and ensure, its safety and efficacy.
Okay, so now let's shift gears and talk about gene therapy. This sounds like something straight out of science fiction.
It does, doesn't it? But the potential is, it's truly remarkable. Gene therapy aims to address mental illness at its genetic roots, either by correcting faulty genes or introducing therapeutic genes.
So instead of just managing symptoms, gene therapy holds the potential to actually cure or even prevent mental illness at the genetic level. That's mind-boggling.
It is, but we need to proceed with caution. The human genome is incredibly complex, and we're still unraveling the interplay of genes and environment in mental health.
I imagine there are also some pretty serious ethical considerations when you start talking about, well, manipulating genes.
Absolutely. The potential for unintended consequences, both for the individual but also for future generations, that's a major concern.
It's a reminder that scientific progress must always be tempered with a deep understanding of the ethical implications and a commitment to the well-being of individuals and society as a whole.
Precisely. And with that, we've covered quite a bit of ground in our exploration of those physical interventions that have been used and that are still being explored to treat mental illness. From the stark realities of shock therapy and lobotomies to the cutting-edge potential of electrode implantation and gene therapy, it's clear that our understanding of the brain and our ability to manipulate it has advanced dramatically over the past century.
It's been a fascinating journey, and it makes me even more curious about the evolution of talking therapies, which we'll explore in our next part.
Yeah, the emergence of talking therapies marked a profound shift in how we view and treat mental illness, moving away from solely biological explanations and embracing the power of the mind, and of course the therapeutic relationship. I'm eager to delve into that fascinating chapter with you.
I'm ready when you are. So for those of you listening, join us in part 2, where we'll dive into the world of talking therapies and explore those fascinating ways in which simply talking can be such a powerful tool for healing and transformation. Welcome back to our deep dive into the history of mental health treatments. We've already journeyed through some, well, pretty intense territory, from the early days of shock therapy and lobotomies to the emerging frontiers of electrode implantation and gene therapy.
It's remarkable how much our understanding of the brain and mental illness has evolved, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And in this part, we're shifting gears. We're going to explore the world of talking therapies where the focus is on the mind rather than directly altering the brain. It's a fascinating evolution in how we approach mental health.
You're right. It's a recognition that our thoughts, our feelings, our experiences, they all play a crucial role in shaping our mental well-being.
And the granddaddy of all talking therapies has to be psychoanalysis, right?
Hmm.
The brainchild of the legendary Sigmund Freud.
Yes, psychoanalysis. Born out of a time when, well, our understanding of brain chemistry was, shall we say, limited. Psychoanalysis shifted the focus to the depths of the unconscious mind.
Okay, so let's unpack this a bit. What exactly does it mean to explore the unconscious?
Freud believed that our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, they're heavily influenced by unconscious drives and unresolved conflicts, often stemming from childhood experiences.
So those buried memories and emotions we're not even aware of.
Precisely. Freud's psychoanalytic theory proposed that these unconscious conflicts, well, they could manifest as psychological distress.
And he came up with this intricate model of the mind, right? With the id, ego, and superego constantly battling it out.
That's right. He saw the id as this primal, instinctual part of our psyche driven by the pleasure principle, the superego that represents our moral compass, our internalized rules and expectations. And the ego, well, the ego tries to mediate between those two, navigating the demands of reality.
It sounds like this constant internal struggle between, like, our deepest desires and societal expectations.
Exactly. And Freud believed that when these conflicts remain unresolved, well, they can lead to all sorts of psychological symptoms.
So how did he go about uncovering these hidden conflicts? I've heard about things like free association and dream analysis.
Those were some of his key techniques. In free association, the patient is, well, encouraged to say whatever comes to mind without censorship or judgment. The therapist then listens for patterns, recurring themes, or slips of the tongue that might reveal underlying conflicts.
It sounds like a way to kind of bypass the conscious mind and tap into those deeper hidden thoughts.
Yes, and dream analysis was another way to do that. Freud believed that dreams were like a window into the unconscious, where repressed desires and anxieties could surface in symbolic form.
So those strange, nonsensical dreams might actually hold hidden meanings.
That was Freud's belief. He saw dream analysis as a way to decipher those symbols and gain insights into the patient's unconscious mind.
And I remember hearing about those ink blot tests, the Rorschach tests.
Yes, projective tests, like the Rorschach, those were another tool in the psychoanalytic toolbox. The idea is that when presented with these ambiguous images, the patient will project their own unconscious thoughts and feelings onto them.
So it's not about what the images actually are, but rather what the person sees in them.
Precisely. The therapist then interprets those responses, looking for patterns and themes that might shed light on the patient's inner world.
Like a psychological puzzle.
You could say that. And it's important to note that the Rorschach test in particular has been the subject of some debate and controversy over its reliability and validity.
So not a foolproof method by any means.
That's right. But it remains a fascinating tool for exploring the unconscious, even if its interpretations are subjective.
Okay, so we've talked about the techniques, but what about the therapeutic relationship in psychoanalysis?
It's considered crucial. Freud believed that the relationship between the therapist and patient, it was essential for the process to work.
In what way?
Well, the therapist is seen as kind of a blank slate, a neutral figure onto whom the patient can project their feelings and thoughts. This allows for the emergence of transference.
Transference, what does that mean?
It's when the patient unconsciously transfers feelings and attitudes they have towards significant people in their lives onto the therapist. For example, they might start treating the therapist like, say, a demanding parent or a critical sibling.
So it's like replaying old relationship patterns within the therapeutic setting.
Exactly. And this can provide valuable insights into the patient's relationship dynamics and underlying conflicts.
And you mentioned something called countertransference.
Yes, that's the flip side. It's when the therapist's own unconscious feelings and experiences, well, they influence how they perceive and react to the patient. Both transference and countertransference, those can be important elements in the therapeutic process, providing further insights into the dynamics at play.
It sounds like psychoanalysis requires a lot of time, patience, and trust to delve into those deep-seated issues.
That's right. It's a long-term commitment, often taking years to uncover and address those unconscious conflicts.
Okay, so psychoanalysis is all about exploring the depths of the unconscious. But in the mid-20th century, a new wave of therapies emerged, known as humanistic therapies, which offered a different perspective.
Yes, humanistic therapies were kind of a reaction to the perceived deterministic nature of psychoanalysis. They emphasized the individual's inherent capacity for growth, the self-actualization, and personal fulfillment.
So instead of being driven by unconscious forces, humanistic therapies empower individuals to make conscious choices and create a more meaningful life.
That's a great way to put it. They focus on the present moment, on conscious thoughts and feelings, and the individual's subjective experience.
Sounds like a much more optimistic and empowering approach.
It is. A key figure in humanistic therapy is Carl Rogers, who developed the non-directive, client-centered approach.
Client-centered therapy. That sounds intriguing. What does it involve?
In client-centered therapy, the therapist acts as the supportive mirror, reflecting the client's thoughts and feelings without judgment or interpretation. They provide unconditional positive regard, creating a safe space for the client to explore their inner world and discover their own solutions.
So it's about empowering the client to take ownership of their journey.
Exactly. Empathy, genuineness, and acceptance, those are the cornerstones of client-centered therapy. It's a collaborative process where the therapist and client work together as equals, fostering a therapeutic relationship built on trust and mutual respect.
It's a far cry from the hierarchical dynamic often seen in psychoanalysis, where the therapist is seen as the expert, interpreting the patient's unconscious.
Indeed. Humanistic therapies aim to empower the individual, recognizing their capacity for self-healing and personal growth.
And speaking of empowerment, another key figure in humanistic therapy is Abraham Maslow, who introduced the concept of self-actualization.
Maslow believed that every individual has an innate drive to reach their full potential, to become the best version of themselves.
To achieve what he called peak experiences and live a life filled with purpose and meaning.
Exactly. Self-actualization isn't about achieving perfection or, conforming to societal expectations. It's about embracing your unique strengths, talents, and values, and striving to live a life that aligns with your authentic self.
It's a journey of personal growth and self-discovery.
You've got it. And for those of you interested in exploring this further, I encourage you to delve deeper into Maslow's hierarchy of needs and his concept of self-actualization.
It's a concept that resonates deeply with so many people, reminding us that we all have this potential for growth and fulfillment within us.
It certainly does.
Okay, so we talked about client-centered therapy and self-actualization, but within humanistic psychology, there's another fascinating approach we should touch on: existential therapy.
Yes, existential therapy, it grapples with some of the big questions that haunt us all. The meaning of life, the inevitability of death, freedom, responsibility, and the search for authenticity.
Sounds pretty intense.
It can be. Existential therapy helps individuals explore their values, make meaningful choices, and take responsibility for shaping their own lives, even in the face of existential angst.
So it's about finding meaning and purpose in a world that can often feel, well, Meaningless and absurd.
Precisely. It encourages individuals to embrace their freedom, make authentic choices, and live a life that aligns with their values, even in the face of, life's inevitable challenges and limitations.
It's a powerful message that reminds us of our agency and our ability to create meaning in our own lives.
I agree.
So from the depths of the unconscious to the quest for meaning and self-actualization, we've seen how talking therapies have evolved to offer a wide range of perspectives and approaches. But now let's shift gears and explore the world of cognitive therapies, where the focus is on the power of our thoughts.
Cognitive therapies are fascinating because they represent a departure from those psychodynamic approaches that delve into the past. Instead, they focus on present-day thoughts and behaviors and how they contribute to our emotional distress.
So it's less about digging into childhood experiences and more about understanding how our current thought patterns are affecting us.
Exactly. A key figure in cognitive therapy is Albert Ellis, who developed the ABC theory of personality.
I've heard of that. Can you refresh our memory on what that theory entails?
Absolutely. It's actually quite straightforward. A represents the activating event, the external situation that triggers a reaction. B represents our beliefs, thoughts, and interpretations of that event. And C represents the consequences, both emotional and behavioral, that stem from our beliefs about that event.
So it's not the event itself that causes our distress,
Yeah.
but rather how we think about it.
Precisely. Let's say, for example, you make a mistake at work. The activating event A is making the mistake. Your belief B might be, oh, I'm so incompetent, I'm going to get fired. And the consequence C could be feeling anxious, overwhelmed, and avoiding, similar tasks in the future.
So the same event, interpreted differently, can lead to completely different outcomes.
Exactly. Cognitive therapies help individuals identify and challenge those negative and often irrational beliefs that contribute to their distress.
It's about recognizing those thought patterns that aren't serving us well and finding ways to reframe them.
Yes. And another key figure in cognitive therapy is Aaron Beck, who introduced the concept of schemas.
Schemas. What are those exactly?
Think of schemas as mental frameworks or filters through which we interpret new information. They're based on our past experiences and can influence how we perceive, ourselves, others, and the world around us. For example, if you have a schema that you're not good enough, you might interpret any criticism or feedback as confirmation of that belief, even if it's not accurate.
So it's like our past experiences are shaping our present perceptions, even if those perceptions are distorted.
Exactly. Cognitive therapies help individuals become aware of these schemas, challenge their validity, and develop more adaptive and realistic ways of thinking.
It's about rewiring our brains to think more realistically and positively.
You got it. And for those of you who are curious to explore this further, I encourage you to look into cognitive biases, which are systematic errors in thinking that can stem from our schemas.
It's amazing how much our thoughts can influence our emotions and behaviors.
It truly is. And the great thing about cognitive therapy is that it's collaborative. The therapist and client work together as partners, identifying problematic thought patterns, challenging their validity, and developing healthier coping mechanisms.
So it's about empowering the client to become their own therapist, equipped with the tools to manage their thoughts and emotions more effectively.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, so we've talked about individual therapies like psychoanalysis, humanistic therapies, and cognitive therapies. But what about the power of group dynamics in therapy?
Group therapy is a fascinating and valuable approach. It offers a unique opportunity for individuals to connect with others who are facing similar challenges, providing a sense of community and shared understanding.
It sounds like it could be incredibly validating to know you're not alone in your struggles.
Absolutely. Group therapy comes in various forms, from support groups where individuals share their experiences and offer encouragement, to skills training groups that focus on developing specific coping mechanisms and interpersonal skills.
So it's like a classroom setting where
Yes,
everyone is both a student and a teacher, learning from each other's experiences and insights.
Exactly. And there are also psychodynamic groups which delve into the unconscious dynamics and interpersonal patterns that contribute to psychological distress.
So it's like applying the principles of psychoanalysis to a group setting, exploring that complex interplay of relationships and unconscious motivations.
Precisely. Group therapy offers a rich and dynamic therapeutic experience. However, there are also some challenges to consider.
Like that.
Confidentiality is a big one. Individuals need to feel safe sharing personal information within a group setting.
I can imagine it takes a lot of trust and vulnerability to open up to a group of people.
You're absolutely right. And the dynamics of group interaction can be complex, with individuals navigating their relationships with each other and the therapist.
Like a microcosm of society with all its complexities and
You
challenges.
could say that. But despite these challenges, group therapies can provide a powerful and transformative experience, fostering a sense of belonging, support, and shared healing.
It's a reminder that we're not alone in our struggles.
Indeed. And now let's transition from the shared experiences of group therapy to the more action-oriented world of behavior therapies.
Behavior therapies are all about taking action, changing those maladaptive behaviors that are holding us back.
That's a great way to put it. Behavior therapies, unlike psychoanalytic or humanistic approaches, focus on observable behaviors and environmental factors that contribute to those behaviors.
So instead of trying to uncover hidden conflicts in the unconscious, behavior therapies address the outward expression of those conflicts in the form of, well, problematic behaviors.
Exactly. And they draw heavily on the principles of learning, particularly classical conditioning and operant conditioning.
I remember learning about Pavlov's dogs and Skinner's boxes in psychology class. It's fascinating how those basic principles of learning can be applied to therapeutic interventions.
You're right. Classical conditioning involves associating a neutral stimulus with a specific response. Think of Pavlov's experiment, where he paired the sound of a bell with food, which eventually caused the dogs to salivate at the sound of the bell alone.
So it's about creating new associations and responses to stimuli. How is this applied in behavior therapy?
A great example is systematic desensitization, a technique used to treat phobias. Let's say you're afraid of spiders. The therapist would gradually expose you to spider-related stimuli, starting with something mild like a picture, while teaching you relaxation techniques.
So you're learning to associate a feeling of calm with something that previously triggered fear and anxiety.
Exactly. Over time, you work your way up to more intense stimuli, like being in the same room as a spider, all while maintaining that state of relaxation. Eventually, the fear response is replaced with a more adaptive response.
So it's like retraining your brain to react differently.
That's it. And then we have operant conditioning, which focuses on shaping behaviors through reinforcement and punishment.
Like training a dog with treats for good behavior.
Exactly. Operant conditioning is about increasing desirable behaviors through positive reinforcement and decreasing undesirable behaviors through punishment or extinction.
Can you give us a real-world example of how this might be used in therapy?
Of course. Let's say someone is trying to quit smoking. You could use positive reinforcement by rewarding them for each day they go without smoking, maybe with something they enjoy. And on the flip side, you could use punishment, like having them pay a small fine for each cigarette they smoke.
So you're making the undesirable behavior less appealing
Yeah.
and the desired behavior more rewarding.
Exactly. It's a powerful way to motivate change.
And there's also that intriguing technique called biofeedback, right?
Wow.
Where people learn to control their physiological responses.
Yes. Biofeedback is a fascinating approach. It involves using electronic devices to monitor physiological responses like heart rate, muscle tension, or brain waves, and then providing feedback to the individual in real time.
So you're basically giving people a window into their own internal state, making the invisible visible.
Precisely. And through this feedback, individuals can learn to control these responses through operant conditioning. For example, if someone is struggling with anxiety, they can use biofeedback to learn how to control their breathing, lower their heart rate, and reduce muscle tension, ultimately reducing their anxiety levels.
It's like taking control of your body's stress response and teaching yourself to relax on demand.
That's a great way to put it. Biofeedback has shown promising results in treating a variety of conditions, from anxiety and chronic pain to migraines and insomnia.
It's incredible how powerful the mind-body connection can be.
It really is.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in our exploration of behavior therapies, from classical and operant conditioning to biofeedback. But now, let's step back for a moment and consider the crucial question of evaluating therapies.
Evaluating therapies is a critical aspect of ensuring that we're providing effective and evidence-based treatments. but it's also a complex undertaking.
Why is that? What makes it so challenging?
Well, for starters, it can be difficult to define and measure therapy in a clear and consistent way. There's so much variability in how therapy is delivered by different therapists and tailored to individual clients' needs.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, which makes it harder to study?
That's right. And then there's the challenge of finding appropriate control groups for research. It's not always ethical to withhold treatment from a control group, especially, when dealing with mental health conditions.
It's a tough ethical dilemma. You want to ensure the rigor of the research, but you also don't want to deny people access to potentially beneficial treatments.
Exactly. And finally, there's the challenge of finding objective measures of improvement. How do you measure something as subjective as mental well-being?
It's not as simple as measuring, blood pressure or temperature.
You're right. There's always a risk of bias in self-reporting, as people might feel pressure to report improvement even if they haven't experienced significant change.
It's like the placebo effect, where people feel better simply because they believe they're receiving treatment, even if it's not actually doing anything.
Precisely. And to illustrate the complexities of evaluating therapies, I want to share a fascinating experiment involving what was called yes-no therapy.
Yes-no therapy. That sounds intriguing. What is that?
In this experiment, clients were told they would be receiving therapy from a therapist behind a screen. They were allowed to ask 20 yes-no questions, and the therapist would respond with a yes or no answer, supposedly based on their expertise.
So it's like a magic 8-ball therapy session.
Exactly. But here's the catch. The therapist was actually just flipping a coin to determine their answers.
So the clients were essentially receiving random, meaningless feedback.
Precisely. And yet many clients reported feeling helped by this therapy.
That's incredible. It really highlights the power of our expectations and beliefs in shaping our perceptions of effectiveness.
It certainly does, and it underscores the importance of rigorous research methods and objective measures in evaluating therapies.
Speaking of rigorous evaluation, you mentioned earlier a famous review by Hans Eysenck that questioned the effectiveness of psychotherapy.
Yes, Eysenck's 1952 review, it was a bombshell at the time. He argued that psychotherapy was no more effective than spontaneous remission, meaning improvement that occurs naturally without intervention.
So he was basically saying that therapy wasn't doing anything more than time and the natural healing process.
That was his conclusion. However, his review, well, it sparked a lot of debate and controversy, prompting researchers to develop more rigorous methods for evaluating therapies. And it's worth noting that Eysenck was more positive about the efficacy of behavior therapies. He believed that behavior therapies, with their focus on measurable behavioral change, were more amenable to the scientific evaluation and showed more promising results.
So even a staunch critic of psychotherapy saw the value in behavior therapies.
Indeed.
So we've explored a wide range of talking therapies and behavior therapies, each with its own unique perspective and set of techniques. But now I'm curious to delve further into the future of mental health treatments.
That's a great question, and it's a topic that's filled with both excitement and uncertainty.
So let's jump into that in part 3. We'll explore the emerging frontiers of mental health care and the challenges and possibilities that lie ahead. Welcome back to our deep dive into the history of mental health treatments. We've covered a lot of ground, from those early physical interventions to the more nuanced world of talking and behavior therapies.
It's been quite a journey, tracing the evolution of how we understand and approach mental illness. Fascinating stuff.
Absolutely. And in this final part, I'm curious about what the future holds for mental health care. We've been talking about those cutting-edge technologies, electroimplantation and gene therapy. But what other advancements are on the horizon?
Well, one area with immense promise is personalized medicine. That's where treatments are tailored to an individual's, unique genetic makeup, their lifestyle, environmental factors, all of that.
So instead of a one-size-fits-all approach, we're moving towards treatments that are specifically designed for each person.
Exactly. Imagine a future where we can use genetic testing to identify individuals who are, say, more likely to respond to certain medications or therapies, minimizing trial and error and maximizing effectiveness.
That'd be a game changer. Would revolutionize how we approach mental health care.
It certainly would. And advances in technology are Well, they're playing a crucial role in this personalized approach, too.
In what way?
Well, there's growing interest in using, for example, artificial intelligence and machine learning to analyze those, vast amounts of data. We're talking brain imaging, genetic information, even social media activity to identify patterns and predict individual responses to treatment.
Wow. Sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie.
It does, doesn't it? But it's becoming a reality. And then there's the increasing use of wearable technology like smartwatches and fitness trackers, to monitor physiological data in real time, providing valuable insights into an individual's mental and emotional state.
So we're talking about using technology to not only personalize treatment, but to, detect early warning signs and intervene proactively.
Precisely. Early detection and intervention, those are crucial for improving outcomes in mental health care.
Okay, so technology is definitely playing a huge role in shaping the future of mental health care. But what about the human element? Will therapists become, obsolete in this high-tech world?
Not at all. While technology is a powerful tool, the therapeutic relationship, that remains at the heart of effective mental health care.
So it's not about replacing therapists with robots, but using technology to enhance the therapeutic process.
Exactly. Technology can provide all sorts of valuable data and insights, but it's the therapist who interprets that information, who builds rapport with the client, and tailors treatment to their individual needs.
It's a good reminder that human connection, empathy, and understanding, those are essential elements in the healing process.
Absolutely. And as we move forward, I think we'll see a greater emphasis on integrative approaches to mental health care, where different treatment modalities, including medication, therapy, lifestyle interventions, alternative therapies, you name it, are all combined in a holistic way.
So it's about finding the right combination of approaches that work best for each individual.
Precisely. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution. It's about creating a personalized treatment plan that addresses the unique needs and preferences of the client.
And I imagine this integrative approach also involves greater collaboration between different healthcare professionals, like psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, primary care physicians, all working together.
You're absolutely right. Breaking down those silos in healthcare, that's crucial for providing comprehensive and coordinated care.
It's about recognizing that mental health is not isolated from physical health or social well-being. It's all interconnected.
Yep. Exactly. And as we wrap up our exploration of the history and future of mental health treatments, I really want to emphasize the importance of prevention.
That's a crucial point. Always better to prevent a problem than to try to fix it after it arises.
You're right. And there's a growing recognition that promoting mental well-being and starting that early on is, well, essential.
So things like teaching children emotional regulation skills, fostering resilience, and creating supportive environments in schools and communities.
Exactly. By investing in prevention, we can create a healthier and more resilient society.
It's an investment in the future of our children and the well-being of generations to come.
I couldn't agree more. And as we conclude our deep dive, I want to leave you with a sense of hope and optimism. While mental illness remains a significant challenge, our understanding and treatment options have advanced dramatically over the past century. And with continued research, innovation, and a commitment to breaking down stigma, we can create a world where mental well-being is valued, supported, and accessible to all.
It's been an incredible journey, exploring the history and future of mental health treatments. Learned so much from this deep dive.
It's been my pleasure.
And to all of you listening, thank you for joining us. We hope you found this exploration informative and insightful. Remember, knowledge is power. Understanding mental health is crucial for creating a more compassionate and supportive world. Until next time, keep thinking, keep questioning, and keep learning.